What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Behind the Facade. I'm your host, Gavin J. Gallagher, and on this podcast, I explore the mental and emotional game often playing out subconsciously, both in your mind and the mind of everyone else in the real estate or property investment market. The key to success in this game is to master your mindset and behavior, to take control of your thoughts, your emotions, and most importantly, your ego. Welcome to the show. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode, and apologies in advance for the poor audio right now. I have no fancy microphone. I'm recording this on the go in the office. I just wanted to quickly remind you, before I jump into introducing our guest this week, I just want to remind you that I have a new intake for the accelerator kicking off in the next 2 weeks. And I'd love to have you on the program if you think you're suitable. I have gone and created a program overview video, and I'm going to leave a link down below in the show notes. And if you think you would be interested in joining, have a look at the video, have a look at the various curriculum stuff that I go through. I explain the course in more detail and stuff. And then after that, if it is of interest, there's actually an application questionnaire that just goes through a couple of qualifying questions just to make sure that you're the right fit for it. It is for the slightly more advanced investor, certainly not for beginners, generally speaking. And so if that sounds like you, go and answer those questions, and it will invite you to have a call with me if it looks like you're the right fit. Now, if you do join, you will be invited to attend the upcoming in-person event. That's going to be, I've actually taken a room out at the airport hotel near the airport, the Carlton, and we're going to have an event there, and there's going to be guest speaker. We're going to do a planning workshop, goal setting workshop, and all of the usual stuff that we do. You'll get to meet all of the existing members. And generally speaking, it's a very well-received event. We always have lunch together and things like that. So it's pretty good. Anyway, that's it. On to the guest. This week's guest is a man by the name Conor McGarry. Now, Conor is the founder of a company called RentDoDo, and it is an online platform aimed at tenants and landlords here in Ireland. I think he will expand, obviously. But at the moment, it's focused on Ireland, and the process is best described as kind of streamlining the rental process, lowering the risk of fraud, doing the background, doing the checks on people and stuff like that, so that when somebody is applying to rent a place, they don't need to go and send emails with all of their information on it. This is all held on a platform that can be switched off after the application is finished. So anyway, guys, it's an interesting discussion with Conor. We go into the market, we go into all of the stuff behind setting up a company in the real estate space in Ireland, and I think you're going to find it interesting and enjoyable. So without further ado, my conversation with Conor McGarry. Conor, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Gavin. Thanks for having me on.
Not at all. RentDoDo, it was new to me, but I see you've been up and running for a couple of years at this stage. Why don't you sort of give us your elevator pitch on what you do and who you are?
Sure. So RentDoDo is a platform for renters and landlords alike, including letting agents. And the idea is to provide tenants with an easier and more secure rental experience, particularly around searching and applying for rental properties in Ireland, and up until the stage where you sign a lease. So the kind of the pre-application and the kind of due diligence phase of the process. And the reason around this was we were kind of looking at the way the rental process in Ireland works, and it's very kind of very ad hoc. It's not very professionalized in terms of people applying to rent, the information they share, how it's shared, and how the kind of the due diligence process works. And it's very much left up to each kind of person's kind of way of doing things, and people are kind of going by their wits, in terms of when they're applying and the amount of information they share, and it's very uncertain. So we want to kind of bring a bit of certainty to that part of the process. And I know there's the data protection laws now, and all of that has been kind of brought in, which kind of helps maybe the consumer, the renter, but it's still very unclear how to kind of proceed. And from one landlord to the next, they'll ask for different amounts of information. Every letting agent will have a different process, so it's very ad hoc. and not very standardized. So with RentDodo, our core feature to kind of help smooth this out is it's a feature called Tenant Cert. And it's essentially just kind of like your rental passport. It's a way of collecting information about renters, and then they can use that with like a one-click application to apply for any rental property, be it on our platform, or they can share it externally on any other platform or channel that they're communicating with. And the tenants are, we do 4 verifications. That's all we can do in Ireland at the moment. We'd love to be able to do more, but what we do is we verify the person's email address and phone number as a at a minimum. And then we ask them to verify their identity as well, and we use ID verification technology there, where they can upload a passport, take a live selfie, and then we kind of do a very simple kind of check just to verify that the person is who they say they are. And then we also have a very basic income verification system, but we're the first in the Ireland to do this, where we use open banking technology to connect the tenant to their bank account, and then they're able to say, yeah, I earn X, and then we scan 6 months of kind of bank history, and we're able to verify that, to kind of say that that's what their affordability is. So there are 4 verifications we do, which is very unique in the Irish rental landscape. No one else is doing verifications like this. But we also gather other information as well, like general lease preferences, a little bit of background about the person. Some of that is optional for kind of data protection purposes. And rental history, references, those sort of things are kind of expected of you. Landlords like to see references from previous landlords. Or if you're, new to the country, you might have a sponsorship or something like that. You might be a foreign student or something like that. And, you might have a university letter or something like that. So people can kind of gather all this information and put it into one safe space. And then when they apply to rent a property through our platform or through another platform, they can control who has access to that information at any time. So they can kind of say, oh yeah, I applied to this particular landlord, never heard back from them. I was going to terminate their access to my tenancy. So that landlord then can never kind of, they no longer have access to that data. So from the landlord letting agent perspective, it's a great way of kind of, just tying up all those loose kind of ends where you would have, maybe data protection issues and the kind of cleanup operation afterwards. For instance, if you put an ad up to rent a property, you'll be inundated with emails. People will send you their personal life story, unsolicited. And then you're going to have a mailbox full of, random documents, and passports and bank statements and payslips. And then by law, you're meant to go and clean that up then, in line with GDPR. But with RentDodo, that's kind of taken care of automatically. So we kind of clean that up for you, so you don't have to worry about it. After 30 days, automatically, the person's tenant cert would expire, but the tenant is in control of that at any time anyway. The site who sees business. And what it isn't is it's not a kind of like a shopping, platform for landlords to pick and choose tenants. We still use the approach where the tenant must show interest in that property to rent before the landlord knows what person is and before they can start reviewing them. Rather than we can kind of trend towards these kind of marketplaces where landlords go shopping for tenants, and tenants are kind of like so desperate to find somewhere that they put themselves up in these kind of like dating websites for tenants. And it's I don't agree with that. We don't like that model. Found it a bit kind of it kind of exposes the tenant too much. And at the end of the day, these people are looking for a place to live. It's quite a serious transaction. It's not something frivolous. So it's quite important that it is professionalized and standardized in this way. So that's the core feature to RentDodo.
I can see a lot of benefits. I can see a lot of benefits that straight off, because whenever I'm speaking to, I have coaching business, and I kind of help people with this process. And a lot of people will, they'll think that asking for, bank statements and proof of funds and things like that, that it's almost, an imposition to go and ask for such data. That's like, oh my God, I can't ask a person for their bank statements. My God, like who am I? And so the fact that you verify that, I can see that as being hugely beneficial.
We would, so the idea behind that was, and people think like, oh my God, open banking, that sounds risky, but the idea is to create a lower risk verification of someone's finances. We're not asking to upload payslips or bank statements. That information doesn't get shared with the landlord. So we just say, yeah, we verified your income. Whether self-employed, PAYE, part-time, full-time, that's irrelevant. You have the income that, is needed to satisfy the rental obligation on this this property. So, how you earn income. And today, people are earning all sorts of way now. People got this gig economy. There's a lot of people are self-employed now.
Yeah.
Multiple things. And, the day of kind of like, we want to remove some bias from that kind of, part of the due diligence, and was the kind of how people earn money and, the sort of job they have shouldn't be a factor as such, so long as they kind of, have the rental references maybe, have the income. And that was another thing behind Tenant Cert as well, was to kind of help reduce bias, so that people kind of had a more level playing field. Now, it is quite difficult to remove all biases, but, you can certainly make certain aspects of it a bit smoother for everyone. And that was one of the things that kind of helped that.
Yeah, I can understand that, like, especially nowadays with the gig economy, you could have somebody who doesn't have a salary per se, but they still do quite well through their own kind of like clients and whatever. And there would be people who would have the old fashioned kind of, I need to see pay slips, and it avoids that.
And also with, say, if you're self-employed, people were looking for a full set of accounts.
For your business.
Get over the top, whereas if you just do a quick kind of, 6-month kind of bank scan, and just verify your income, that kind of simplified.
Yeah, makes sense. And tell us, Conor, like, if you take us back to forming the business, like, was there an experience that you went through or some sort of a catalyst that gave you the idea?
Yeah, I've always been interested in rental platforms from kind of like early days. My background's in finance and tax, and then I moved into internet marketing then in around 2012 after the kind of recession here, and was in that for a long time. And then I always had this idea of kind of bringing technology and kind of renting together, and specifically on the rental side and not on the kind of the home purchase side. And I'm a part-time landlord, like a lot of people in Ireland. The majority of the rental market in Ireland is small landlords. It's made up of people kind of 2 or 3 units. And, I was just going through the process, finding new tenants, stuff like that. And it just struck me that there's absolutely nothing here that can assist me. Apart from just putting an ad up online, but that's about it. And then I have to sift through everyone, I have to kind of ask them all the questions. And some people then don't come back with certain bits of information and things like that. And just thought, well, this should be kind of, streamlined. Professionalized, and the RTB don't care about it. Regulators don't care about it. Politicians don't really seem to be fussed about it. And also at the same time, there was a kind of rise in rental scams as well. Particularly when you have a kind of a huge pressure on to find a place, and there's very little supply for tenants. They're under more pressure. That means they're much more susceptible to falling foul to a rental scam. And particularly with a huge migrant population in Ireland now, they might be too familiar with how the kind of the rental sector works in Ireland. They're especially falling victim to rental scams, and particularly in the rental room space. The full rental properties are regulated to an extent by the RTB, but the rental room is wide open to abuse. There's no real, people don't actually know what their rights are in that space. And so if we can provide, some sort of ID verification system on the landlord and on the tenant, it helps kind of, discourage the scammer from the process. So one thing we're doing now is this year when we launched a search directory to go with our platform, and anyone that wants to put a property on the search directory has to be verified first. So we verify their ID as well. So it's not just the tenants getting verified, it's the landlords and the room hosts getting verified. And that the idea behind that is we hope that will become a standard in the industry, that there's proper ID checks on everyone, so that these room kind of people renting out rooms and scamming people. And one of the common ones was a person would rent an Airbnb, pretend it's their own house, and then they have the lease on it or whatever, and then over a weekend it was clean out a lot of people, and that's happened a few times over the years, and guards kind of put that on the kind of one of the high things to watch out for. So we verified who the person is, but there are more verifications we'd love to be able to do, like, being able to verify the person has the kind of lease or owns that property. And that's something very hard to do in Ireland, because so many different kind of databases, and they're very hard to access. You can't access them quickly and cheaply, and they require all kind of property searches and stuff. So that's an area we'd love to be able to see, some sort of kind of, improvement on. But we would say to kind of tenants, okay, we'll do a certain amount of background check. but I asked for kind of, proof of ownership or proof of occupancy of that property, like the property tax receipt, utility bills, etc. And other things the guards are recommending as well, and I thought this was hilarious at the time when I read it first, but I tell everyone now that get the keys and check them in the door, check all the keys before you've paid the rent, the first deposit, because at least then, if you get scammed, you still have access to that property, but, don't pay to foreign IBANs, pay to an Irish get an ID check on the person, in person as well, and all of that. So there's a lot of checks that people can be aware of. A good one is the BERs, properties are meant to have a BER search.
Yes.
Rooms not, but properties, yes. And every BER has a unique cert number that you can look up. And that kind of gives a little bit, something that you can reference against. And then the RTB as well, they'll have, the landlords will have registered previous leases on that property with the RTB. Could ask them for a previous, RTB receipt or something like that on their name and property address. So things like that will be, sort of good. But again, it's very, this sort of thing, it's very hard to do this online in a kind of standard way because you've lots of different agencies, lots of different databases, so it's quite difficult to kind of to make it a kind of, every property, do a kind of a verification on the property owner and using technology. Hopefully that's something that comes along and something we'll be looking at.
If they could just standardize it, it would help, wouldn't it? Like if it was the BER cert or if it was the property tax payment or whatever it is that your name is referenced to the property on multiple sources, at least the property belongs to that person.
Exactly, yeah. So that's what we'll be kind of encouraging people to do. But we do the ID check. That would discourage scammers from using our platform. And eventually we'd like to kind of get to a case. It's like, why are you not doing ID verification? What have you got to hide? So that's kind of where we want the second one. It's millions of euros a year of deposit scams. And it's actually this time of year now is when deposit scams are at the highest, August, September. You kind of have the last minute kind of wave of students looking for accommodation before they go to university.
Yeah.
And
panic setting in.
Yes, exactly. So,
one of the things that my clients tell me about, and there's one in particular who she looks after quite a few properties, and she's on a couple of occasions the landlord's reference letter comes across her desk, and it's a carbon copy of another one that she saw just a few days prior to that.
Yeah.
And it's like different names, and it's like, yes, and it's clearly been written by somebody whose English is not their first tongue and stuff. It's like, yes, I own property, such and such, and like written in weird English and stuff. And like, how do you kind of verify that kind of thing?
Again, the reference letter, we asked them to upload a history of their rental history, when they complete their tenant cert, and we asked them to put in the landlord's name and phone number and email address to have it. I suppose if you've been renting from a letting agency, that's kind of, something that you can use to your advantage because, first of all, it's much harder to fake a letting agency. Now, it has happened online. I've seen it on various Facebook groups, but a letting agency has a 6-digit PSR number. You can check that against the PSO database, the Property Services Regulatory database, and you can see, who the letting agent purports to be, and then verify them in this database. If you get a reference in from a previous letting agency, that's a great reference to have because you can really independently verify that. If it's not, I would insist on the phone number, and I'd make sure I get them on the phone, and you could follow it, using your own instinct and judgment, you could probably find out. It would be cool if there was something like, with a reference, you had to attach the RTB receipt number, the reference number of that lease. So just so your listeners are aware that every lease has to be registered with the RTB, and it's now an annual registration, and you'll get a receipt number for that. If you're putting up a reference, you maybe ask for the RTB receipt number of your landlord, checking out previous the tenant's previous references. That would be a good thing to ask. And so you can kind of just have a bit more kind of information that you can reference independently. So I think they have the written reference. Some people actually just only go by written reference, but I'd opt stuff for phone call because
for sure.
I think you can you can fake a letter, but it's much harder. You can probably catch someone out by a phone call much easier than you can by a written letter. And now with ChatGPT and all these things, you can probably get the best references in the world, no matter what your language is.
It's funny you say that, because I've had a guy that called me up one day and was asking me for a reference for somebody, and I was like, but I'm not renting I don't have a property to be rented. And he's like, no, he's giving you as a reference. And it was a guy whose father I knew, and the son just used my name, without telling me that he was going to do this. I was it didn't go too well, as you can imagine, when you're caught on the spot like that. I guess he didn't think that I was actually going to be phoned, but it's one of those things that, and tell us, Conor, in terms of starting up a business like this in Ireland, I'm sure you face a lot of challenges and things like that. What's it like to start up in a business like this?
We started, I started kind of developing it, but kind of putting the idea together during COVID, and then I left my previous job during COVID. So just working at home, kind of coming up with ideas and stuff like that. And then I knew a software developer and approached him, and because I'm not a developer myself, so I think that's the hardest part with building a platform like this is the technology at the beginning. You want to build a piece of software that people are going to use, but obviously you depend on the software developer to kind of understand your idea and all that. So but we're able to work well remotely actually, and I've worked with software developers prior to this, so that was kind of we kind of got things rolling pretty well. And finding a good designer, web designer, a good software developer, I think was what key to kind of getting the platform off the ground. But interesting, when we started getting people kind of trialing it out last year in 2023, we worked with a couple of letting agents that were kind of testing the platform and stuff like that. And say, oh no, it should do this, it should do that. I wish you could do this, wish you could do that. And that's what we're saying to kind of the early users now. When we really went live kind of in May this year. But the early users, we kind of said to them this is something that you can kind of shape, because the platform's quite new, it's still quite malleable, we can build in functionality and things like that.
Feedback is critical, The
feedback is critical, because I might think of something and then someone else might have to do that to you. So getting that kind of real world feedback is great. So the platform is constantly evolving. We're building new features into it all the time. So we want to go from, so we have the tenant search as the core features, kind of it's all built around the tenant. And then we built up the search directory, which has full properties and room rentals. And there's a viewing scheduler, so you can kind of set an appointment to view a property. But we will be building a lease wizard, which will essentially allow you to, within the ecosystem, just bring your preferred tenant through pipeline of the vetting, setting up the viewing, and then creating a lease, and it'll be all a digital lease.
Okay, brilliant.
Full of entry, and kind of condition report, where you can take videos and pictures and attach them to the lease, which we find is something really important. That when we come to the end of the lease, we want to reduce the amount of friction over the deposit. So have a full paper trail there, audit trail of everything, so the system will take care of that for the landlord. And then there's much less dispute over the kind of deposit. And then we'd love to be able to kind of have the digital signing of the lease and the payment of the deposit through us, using various kind of checks and stuff that the landlord and the tenant agree to. And that means then that small landlords who, there's a lot of software out there for kind of big property managers, CRMs, kind of like Salesforce type CRMs that are built for kind of multi-unit kind of managers, that are managing hundreds, thousands of rented properties. There's nothing for kind of like someone that has like two properties. They might only have one coming up to rent each year. And the way we want to position it is that it's kind of on a per property basis you pay. There's no ongoing subscription. There's no kind of recurring annual fee. It's just if you need it, we're here for you. You can just pay once-off charge per property, and you get access. You can unlock those features for as long as you need to rent that property. And then you don't have to pay any more then until the next time it comes up for rent. So we've kind of that pay-as-you-go model, which we think is fair. It appeals to that kind of smaller end of the market, which majority of the Irish market, there's 170,000 landlords in Ireland. There's 350,000 rental properties. So, you're talking about, on average 2 per landlord. Okay, in recent years we've seen the bigger kind of funds come in and blocks of apartments, but still the majority is kind of mom and pop type landlords. And
Yeah.
and that's who we're kind of appealing to. And then the rental space, which is, again, it's a sector we don't really know the size of because it's not regulated. There's no real data on it.
Yeah.
I'd imagine it's in the hundreds of thousands, and hugely unregulated. So we want to have this tool ready for those people. Say someone who wants to earn a couple of quid on the side, they can rent out the spare room, particularly empty nesters and people like that, that might have a big 5-bedroom house, but they're the only person left in it. They could rent out a few rooms. And that's quite an attractive prospect as well, because it's like up to 14,000 a year tax free for those renting out those rooms. So there's a lot of kind of potential there.
Yeah, that's a very relevant topic to my mastermind. It's like we've just been talking about it in the past few days about the 14,000, and people were wondering, is that combined with the room that could be rented to a Ukrainian refugee, and that there's a certain amount that can be done tax free, all that kind of stuff as well.
Yeah, I think there's probably I'm not 100% familiar with that, but there are a couple of schemes. There is the kind of rent to a Ukrainian refugee. There's the standard 14,000 a year. On the other side, the tenant now is getting, a tax credit every year, which is becoming quite lucrative. Talk of, putting that up again in the budget. Kind of streamlining all of that and kind of making people more aware of that, I think, would help kind of relieve some of the pressure on the sector, particularly around, where we're near universities and the hospitals where you kind of students or key staff, they just need a room for maybe 6 months of the year or something like that. These kind of investors could play a role there. And that's, who we're kind of one of the markets one of the sector we want to appeal to is, those empty nesters. You can kind of, the due diligence, which is probably more important there, who am I letting into my house,
Yeah, big time, yeah.
I probably need to know more about the person, and things like that. And the tenants are helps there. We let them write bios, these preferences, a little bit of background, do they have pets, do they have dependents,
even a video, even if you did a very brief video, introduce yourself, kind of.
Exactly, yeah.
You'd feel like you know them a little bit better, and like, oh, that looks like a nice young lady. Yeah. I'd feel comfortable with her,
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. And in terms of like funding the business and stuff like that, did you rely on the likes of Enterprise Ireland or any of that kind of stuff?
We self-funded. Myself and my brother set it up, and we funded it ourselves, and we're still at that phase. We're still funding it ourselves.
Bootstrapping.
Yes, and we still got some. We got some support from the local enterprise office, Enterprise Ireland. We have been in touch with as well. They have different hoops to jump through, I suppose. But the local enterprise office was one of the kind of easier ones to get over. And we will be speaking to kind of other private investors, shortly. So but at the moment we're doing it ourselves for now, and it's we managed to get this far. So
sounds good.
We can get something going. We have the search directory now is live. It's since May, and that's been kind of a key benefit that landlords now and letting agents can actually put their properties up on our search directory. So people can find it, apply for it, fill out all their due diligence, and go through the kind of pre-screening process now in all one place. So yes, that's kind of getting things moving. So we've had about 500, 600 listings through the site now so far, and about 4,000 users have gone through it. So it's starting to kind of lift off a little bit.
That's great. And you mentioned before we started recording that you're thinking of, at some point you might venture into other markets. Presumably the UK is a big opportunity for you.
Yeah, other markets is interesting. The way we would look at what is, which part of our platform is most portable into a market, that needs a kind of, that's lacking a tech solution. Ireland is lacking a tech solution in this space. Like Airbnb has more, kind of brought in more tech into that short-term kind of holiday rental space, than exists in kind of the full-time residential space, and which is astonishing, really. And, so we want to look at other markets where there is a lack in the kind of, that kind of, residential sector, where there's no kind of checks, where there's really poor due diligence. Can we go in there and kind of, bring our technology there? So that's the way we would look at it. Obviously, UK would be great, to speak English as well, very similar market. But they probably, they have other platforms in the UK as well that kind of do something similar to us.
Right.
But and it's, generally they tend to have kind of, further down to kind of the road than us in terms of technical products and stuff like that, solutions for things. But there's plenty of other markets across Europe because the data protection stuff is kind of EU-wide now. You can kind of like slip into any market with the kind of same solution, and in terms of the way that the data protection is handled and all that is now uniform across EU. So that's quite interesting for someone like us. We kind of look at other markets, not just straight into the UK. But yeah, certainly we'll be looking at all of that. In Ireland.
One of the things, I lived in the UK for a period of time, and I remember when I was renting the place, you mentioned it earlier, just the deposit and all that. I can remember because I've been a landlord for 30 years now at this stage, but when I was over there for the first time as a tenant, I can remember showing up and this guy giving me this report. It was the condition report, like here's the property, here's how it's been. And I remember seeing this. It was all professionally done, like they had brought in some guy that does this day in, day out. And then when I was leaving a year later, the same guy came back in and he was going around with photographs and all this, and then served me this thing, and he had noticed something with the wallpaper, and I think my wife had been like spraying something on her hair or something, and had gone onto the wallpaper, and it was like an oil-based product, so it actually wasn't something that you could. And sure enough, so there was a little deduction for that. But this guy itemized it and did all this stuff. So it wasn't something that you feel like you're being scammed by the landlord. It was a guy, like an independent party, like. And so I remember thinking, oh wow, this is really different. We should have that back home as well,
Absolutely, they've the deposit scheme now as well. It's independently held, and they have those assessments. And in Ireland, I think we should definitely do that. But I think deposit insurance or landlord insurance should, probably replace that, because then you wouldn't necessarily need a deposit up front. The tenant could pay the deposit, the kind of deposit insurance, and it's not limited to 1 month's rent either, which is quite restrictive, because if there's a lot of that property, 1 month's not going to cut it. It could be multiples, of that.
So if it was like €20 a month for an ongoing kind of insurance policy, that's a great idea,
And there is landlord's insurance available, but it's the landlord pays for it. Whereas if the tenant had to pay it as part of it in lieu of their deposit, so it means then that the tenant doesn't have to pay a huge amount of money up front. It's now like a typical, say, a 2-bed lease in Dublin now is like $1,800, $2,000 at least. So that's a $4,000 up front payment. If they didn't have that, but they had to pay a little amount every month, to cover any damage they might do to the property. On that, with proper condition report and inventory and all that, and that's certainly something that could, I think that would be a huge improvement for everyone. Because then the landlords, the hard part being a landlord is there's a huge amount of repair work that needs to be done after a lease is over. Whereas if the insurance covered that, or if there was exceptional amount of damage or whatever, see the typical deposit, peace of mind for the landlord, then they don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing that actually, now that you're talking about it, is like there's a void period. If somebody wrecks your apartment, it's not just the cost of fixing it up, but it's also you can't rent it. So you will have a void of maybe 4 weeks or something like that, where you're not able to rent the property. So if you could have that included in the insurance, that loss of rent for a month or whatever it is, that could be beneficial.
Absolutely. Now that's unlikely in Dublin at the current. I think you could still smell the paint. It was still drying on the last time I rented out. So the turnover was so quick. So, but yeah, no, absolutely. And that could change. I think, it's a good time for landlords at the moment, but I think, that might not always be the case,
Well, it's funny you say that, like good time for landlords. It's all relevant because the landlords that I speak to, they're keen to get into the market, but then when they're in the market, they realize, God, it's hard work, like, with the taxation and with all this kind of stuff, that it's only if you're doing it at scale that it really starts to kind of make sense. If you're doing it as a single or, it's kind of very marginal, like, especially if you're already earning a salary and so you're paying 52% tax on every penny that you earn.
That is true. And it's very hard to figure out what's deductibles, and what is deductible, what isn't, a lot of cap stuff isn't, So that is I suppose, a burden for the smaller landlords that isn't the case for the big landlords. So that would be something nice to see, and maybe leveled out a bit,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Conor, how do you see the market? Like, just curious, as a person who is directly impacted by the property market, but you're not an actual landlord, you have a business. I mean, what do you think the future holds?
I mean, it's so hard to say. I think the thing what I have noticed is, though, where we kind of envisaged, I think before COVID, 20, if you're in your 20s or 30s, you're typically renting, say if you're an Irish person, that's, they're not the bigger share of the market anymore. It's actually the migrant workers, because they don't have a family house they can move into. So they become the new normal. So we see, people who sign up to our website who apply for properties, the majority, I'm talking about like 80% are, migrant workers, that are here, they might only be here, recently or whatever, but they're your new that's your new rental market. The kind of, students have to move out, to want to go to university, have a good time, etc. But like a lot of 20 and 30-year-olds are kind of, a lot of people that I know have moved back in with their parents temporarily, and COVID kind of, a lot of that happened during COVID. A lot of people did move back, safe deposit, the story, and then hopefully they're buy them eventually. That's kind of the new normal. So I think where that's going to go, I mean, we thought that the work from home movement would kind of move people out of the city more. It hasn't really happened a lot. There's still huge pressure in Dublin City. People can move maybe to kind of regional areas, where it's cheaper to rent. I'm not sure, seeing rents are going up everywhere. So maybe there is an element of that, but I still think Dublin is still crazy, in terms of the market.
Well, it's where like a lot of those migrant workers are going to work for tech companies, and the tech companies are all pretty much based in Dublin. Yeah.
Would their offices move out of Ireland, and where there's kind of cheaper cities, and then the workforce moves? Is that a risk? Maybe something that needs to be factored in. I think by whoever's
I think it's a risk. I think it's a risk, but then at the same time, one of the big factors is the tax base here, and as long as that doesn't change dramatically, I can't see them. I do know from my own experience. I work with some of the big tech companies, and I have seen situations where in a very, very short space of time, they can turn around and say, oh yeah, no, we're going to actually outsource that to Barcelona. And just like that, there would be 400 people let go, and the jobs would be moved to Barcelona because they can get it for half the price or something. So there is that, but I don't think the headquarters will move. I think it'll be certain sort of projects or whatever that are being done.
And that's probably going to be, that will impact the rental sector here. I think, though, the supply, like if you think back to 2006, and there were, flying up houses, and everyone was invested in it, for good or bad, and there's lessons there to be learned for sure. But there was a lot more mom and pops involved, that buying units. That's gone. That day is gone. So how do you get back to that? Is it ever going to come back? That's hurting the rental sector, I think. You mentioned there earlier. It's very high on small landlords, but they're not coming in. Once upon a time, they used to come in. They buy one or two units, maybe it's a pension or whatever it is, but they were active players in the sector. That's not the case now.
It's so true.
Bigger multi-unit guys are there. There's local authority housing, few local authority schemes, council housing and stuff. But the kind of private individual landlords, they're not there. And if you could get them back into the sector, because I suppose there's two things there I've noticed is that, you don't have small builders anymore. You don't have small landlords anymore. And the small builders would put houses and apartments anywhere, back in 2006, when you think about it, like there's little small developments popping up everywhere. Particularly outside of Dublin areas where there's Section 23 type schemes and stuff like that. They're all gone. The landlords aren't entering the market anymore. They're not expanding their portfolios. The small builders are gone. So...
there's also I think you're right, and there's a hang up of after what happened as well, because I do quite a bit of social media stuff, and the amount of people that comment that we're back up at the same prices as we were at the peak, and therefore there's a crash on the verge any moment now. And my view is I push back on that, because we're sort of 17 years on now. Like, I mean, it's. You wouldn't expect us to be at the same level 17 years on. Like, it's almost a full generation has gone now by since that crash,
Yeah. So I think that I don't see any kind of great, kind of solution coming down the track anytime soon. We're talking about 45,000 houses this year, you go up by 5 a year, maybe, 50,000. I'm not sure what the number is, but that's still not enough. If you look at the demographic pressures alone, that's just not enough. So,
yeah.
Is there going to be a crash? I don't know. I don't know how it would manifest itself. The previous one, credit bubble, blew up, but I'm not sure what's going to be this time.
I don't think so. Yeah, I think the banks are way too controlled in their lending policies nowadays, and so it certainly wouldn't be caused by that. I mean, the only way I could see it happening is if there was, an affordability crisis, like with the fact that inflation was out of control and prices of interest, interest went sky high or something. That would obviously impact it dramatically, but that seems to be back under control as well. So unless something like, what's happening between Russia and Ukraine and the Middle East and stuff, unless that was to kind of blow up into a wider sort of war or something like that, maybe that could dent investor confidence or something like that. But hard to see it manifesting, as you say.
Yeah, I suppose if we could see it, then we could avert it. So I suppose you can't avert crisis because you don't see them coming as such.
Yeah, they're almost never foreseeable. Like that. Yeah, like we all wish 2005 we had seen what was coming, because you could have prepared well for it. Conor, in terms of starting a business, like you were saying that you were, it was COVID and you had left your job. Did you leave your job to start up, or did you leave your job like for other reasons?
I left the job to start this up, and I was in a similar business actually in the franchise sector, Franchise Direct, another Irish lead generation business in the franchise sector, which I was there for about 8 or 9 years, and I just now was the time to change. COVID was a great time to kind of look at new projects and set up the business. I was saying we've got a designer, developer, now we've got a customer service person, we've got a business development person, we've got a second developer, and we all work remotely now. We've never had, we've had an office in Galway City for a time, but the developers were kind of interested in moving around, and they wanted to see more of the world, but they can still work.
Are they all based in Ireland, all of your team?
Yes, they are, but we've had kind of in and out of the project at different times when we needed certain skill sets. We've had people from guys from Ukraine working on the project, like in the middle of the war. We've had designers from Croatia, had a guy from Finland, a guy from Austria, but at the moment now the team is all based in Ireland. But we're all remotely, and it's technology to keep in touch. And it's worked pretty well. We've got a good kind of system, in play. It kind of keeps the kind of the overheads down, as I say, and we're quite flexible and adaptable, which you need to be with a new startup like this, because you can suddenly just change direction. The feature you completely overlooked, but there's a feature that you didn't need, and you just need to be able to kind of pivot the website a certain way, the product a certain way. And that's kind of with a kind of a business like us, where it's remote, it kind of fits them. Kind of there's a good kind of like, I suppose the nature of the business is very flexible. We kind of have so it's worked out.
And you mentioned that you went live in May of this year.
Yeah, we've been live. I suppose we've been kind of rolling out. Initially, we kind of just had tenant cert, and that was kind of people could get all of their leads, say all of their applications in from one of the other portals or social media, whatever the channel they were using, to push them into RentDoDo, and then RentDoDo would ask them to do all their tenant cert work, and then you could vet your candidates through that. And then people were saying like it was always our intention to have more features both to onto this. So the search directory then went live in May, and I suppose that's when you can kind of touch and feel it. Then you can go on. There's a map,
right?
Really easy to use map interface. You just find where you want to live, find what rental property you have in that area. And then you log in to apply, start creating your tenant cert. The landlord can see that in real time. They can see how much data people have put into their tenant cert. And they can start kind of pre-screening based on the information tenants put in and things like that. So that's, and then they can bring, create a short list then off of that, then bring them forward to viewing. And the idea that we'll have more features coming down the line, like the lease wizard, the deposit payments, the inventory check, the condition report, all of that stuff will be kind of built on as well. So it'll be all within the kind of the RentDoDo ecosystem. And it will be like kind of tailored for the small landlord. Like, I mean, there is no real limit to, a person with 100 properties to rent could use RentDoDo, a person with 1 property to rent. It's designed that way. So we don't have, if you want to talk to kind of maybe some of the big platforms like Yardi, they're kind of enterprise level software.
Yeah, huge.
The small guys, and they're not going to look for it. So I think it is specifically kind of tailored for the Irish market, but we're certain that it can be used by big agencies as well,
And in terms of the time it's taken you to develop the first iteration that was actually out there being used, how long is it? A year? Was it less?
That was in early 2023, and so that was kind of in the wild for a year, and then this year, then the search directory came along. So we're like that. I suppose 2023 was crazy because we kind of we changed direction loads of different times. Because we didn't need features that we were building, and then features that we didn't have that we needed to build. So we're kind of changing direction, and just fine tuning what we had in tenant search. So definitely, right. I think people think startup, from my experience anyway, and maybe other startups, maybe they agree or disagree, but it's not instant. Like people think like, oh, they're just boom overnight. Like that's not true. It's a lot of time goes into it. And then you have to go out and find customers and users. And that's not that easy either. I suppose you hope you have a good enough solution that people want to use. But going out, you can find those users, find the landlords, letting you find the tenants that want to use the platform. And then get their feedback, etc., and then rinse and repeat. It's not an overnight thing. I think startups have this kind of maybe. There's a reputation out there that the arrow went to spring up like mushrooms, but that's I think some of the there's a funny website that looks at the kind of the first home pages of startups like Airbnb and Uber and stuff, and it's like they're cringe, they're really badly designed and they're really ugly looking, and they say like, oh, this will never take off, and they keep at it, and they're there a few years later, and then suddenly they're big.
Iterate. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
And Conor, what advice would you give to somebody who's thinking of starting up a business of any type?
I think having the team is everything. Having first of all, you can't do it alone. That might be a cliche, but it's true. It's 100% true. You need a good support network like RNG. A lot of different skill sets as well, because I think someone said to me once, like say when it comes to managing a business, people think they can do everything, and then they don't delegate or they don't bring in expertise. So I think it's knowing your own kind of limitations and building a good team to fill in where you couldn't possibly do this yourself. You need other experts in there to able to kind of fill that gap. So building a good team that have varied skill sets, so that you're not stuck then, we don't have that person that can do that job, and I thought I could do it, and we made it. So I think understand your own limitations, and then having a good support network, and then having a good support network that are not part of the business, like whether it's family, friends, or whatever. It's good actually getting feedback from them at times at the very beginning, because they can be pretty brutal with you.
Yeah, they're not protecting your feelings.
They're like, oh, that'll never work, or oh, that's amazing. Why don't you try this? And sometimes that's really helpful. But and then I obviously. It's great, and we were able to kind of fund it this far, and we'll be looking at more funding now, external funding soon. But obviously, having the finance obviously helps, over without saying. But I think the people are, that's everything.
That's everything.
You haven't got the skills and the people, it's dead,
And in terms of the advice that you've received from, let's say, mentors or anybody that's kind of helped you along the way, what would you say is the best advice that you've received?
Good question. I think I've got a lot of different advice. some of them, like some guys get good advice on the marketing side, good advice on the finance side. I think be ready to, I suppose, pivot or kind of adapt a new strategy very quickly when you're a startup. I think that's being kind of like kind of cut your losses. It's something if you're going down a kind of an avenue where there's a bit of a rabbit hole. Being able to kind of just see that and kind of there's nothing wrong with kind of going down a road, making a mistake, and then having to change direction.
Got it. Yeah.
I think that's I think people are going to get hung up about that. That was kind of good to kind of because I think you can get blinkered. And someone said no, kind of you can get out of this. Just put your losses and revisit this. So I definitely think mentorship in general, I think is a good thing. Whatever the specific mentorship is, I think just having outside mentors itself, is good because this month I need advice on finance, next month marketing, something software development, next month whatever it's a HR issue. I think just having those outside kind of guys who've been through it, and that you can just bounce ideas off or problems off, and they can just give you a bit of clarity because you often do get a bit blinked, and sometimes it's a lonely place. So I'm not a startup because you're setting up a business, you think it all rests on your shoulders.
It's so true. Yeah. Because I found I find that somebody else can just sort of a sounding board, and like I get a lot of people. I act as a mentor for quite a few people, and they'll come to me with some ideas, and like the smart people, they know what they're doing, and yet they can sometimes just be in a bit of a tunnel with tunnel vision. And I'll say, and I can look at it, and like I don't have any axe to grind or anything like that. I just sort of say, what about this? Like, what about that? Is that not like a bit of a red flag or whatever? And suddenly it's like, gosh, I never even thought about that, So you can actually, I find it almost easier as a mentor looking in rather than when I was there in myself, because then you're kind of second guessing yourself all the time,
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I've other people, kind of in maybe similar places, and then you give them kind of advice, because they're, God, it's really easy to give advice,
Yeah.
More of it, in myself, so yeah, I definitely think having a couple of mentors around, and they don't have to be like, just once, they might be specialized in a particular area, but it's generally people who've lived life, kind of, are able to kind of figure out problems that you might see, so it's good having that to hand. And then another one, I suppose, one bit of advice I know is, particularly with software development that has software involvement or design is, if you're a perfectionist, you'll never have anything. And you kind of have to know when to kind of stop with the perfectionism because, you could be there looking at it forever. It's just not right. Just get this and just that. Sometimes you have to just let it go and let move on. And let it go and see how it goes. So yeah, if you're a perfectionist, you kind of maybe need to kind of watch that.
Well, isn't the old saying that they say, like, if you're not embarrassed by the first iteration, then you waited too long, basically. Like,
yeah,
it's very true. Conor, I'm watching the time. In terms of a final question I like to ask my guests is, knowing now what you know, if you were to have an opportunity to whisper some words of advice into the ear of 18-year-old Conor, what advice would you give yourself?
I mean, I think, okay, that's a good point, actually. Yeah, so during when I did my leaving cert results just came out last week or whatever. And,
my daughter just got her leaving cert results, so it's very relevant to me. Yeah,
I got into the course. I started doing computer science, but then I just dropped out after a year and then did a BA in economics. So even within my university, I just changed direction like that. And then it was in finance, probably. But then I went into informatics, so I just changed. So I wouldn't think your career is ever on a particular track. You can jump in and out of different, industries or sectors or career paths or whatever anytime you want. Don't feel you ever kind of gone down this track. You can't get out of it. I think that's becoming more. I think more and more apparent now. People I know, like say, people kind of my age, say middle age or whatever. They are jumping into new things now. That's becoming more common now.
Yeah.
I think when you're 18, I suppose the career advice we got when we were that young was, you have to pick a career and stick with it, and
get a job. Yeah.
No, I think don't worry about that. If you pick the wrong career and then suddenly you're in your mid-20s, you're still very young. I mean, just enjoy life and enjoy what you do. I think
It's so
don't
true.
worry about that.
I think that's great advice, Conor, because I did architecture and I spent 5 years. In fact, I did a year out. So I did 6 years before I got qualified. And I came out and I started working. And within 2 years, I jumped ship out of the industry into, well, stayed in the industry, but moved from architecture into development and property and stuff like that. Just, it is. Yeah. Great advice.
No, that's one last thing. Actually, it was funny because I was talked out of doing accountancy for my leaving cert, and then my first job was bookkeeping, and I didn't even do it in college.
Ironic.
What's a general ledger? What's a balance sheet? What's a profit and loss? And then this guy said, "Here's a spreadsheet. That's what it is." I said, "All right." In about 10 minutes, I was doing
spreadsheets.
So there you go. So it's we get kind of, maybe when we're 18, don't know, we kind of have to pick a horse, to stick with. But you can chop and change. Don't worry about it.
I think that's great advice. Conor, how can people find out more about you and your business?
RentDoDo.ie and
I'll leave a link in the show notes. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
And in terms of social media, do you do like LinkedIn or any of that kind of stuff?
Yeah, we have a presence on social media, and I suppose LinkedIn, you can find me or RentDoDo on LinkedIn, so that's we're both there.
Great stuff. All right, well, it's great to see a new business in that sector. I can definitely see a lot of use cases for it. So wishing you the best of luck, Conor, and I look forward to learning more about it.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Behind the Facade. If you enjoyed the show or found it in any way useful, could I please ask you to take a moment to leave a review over on iTunes or Spotify? This really helps us get the podcast out in front of more people. If you have any questions or topics you would like me to cover in future episodes, please connect with me via my brand new school community. You will find a link in the show notes. You can stay up to date with all of my content and the projects I'm working on by signing up for my weekly newsletter over on my website, gavinjgallagher.com. That's all for now. See you back here, same time next week.